Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Demai, Pedig Zayin, Halacha Dalid, and Hey. We are starting Daf Ayin, so we are already in the 70s, and we are mamish heading already towards the Siyum. We left off on Daf Ayin Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amid, that Mechalfa Shitase de Rab Shimon ben Lakish, and let's quickly review where we are up to. First of all, on Daf Samach Tes Amid Beis, Reish Lakish had 2 questions that he asked to Rabbi Yechanan, and one of the questions were that in Me'ilah, in Bavli Me'ilah, Daf Chof Aleph, the Mishnah records Shitas Rabbi Akiva that when a person says Pruta Bakis Ze Hegdish, so the words of the Mishnah is Al Harishoyna Ma'al B'Safek, or at least that is the way the Brais explains the Mishnah. And the question that Reish Lakish had is V'Gavaldik, that since we learned in our Mishnah, in the case of when a person buys Yain Ben Hakutin, that if a person makes a non-specific designation, simply by saying that which I'm going to take off Trumas U'Maisros. And we learned in our sugya that if the person eventually does not do anything, he does not separate Trumas U'Maisros, even though he made a designation, but since it was a non-specific designation, it chaps that whatever he did is undone. Right? That's the whole chashash of Rabbi Yossi and Rab Shimon. Rab Meir is not chayish to it, but everyone would agree that if the person at the end of the day will not remove anything, then God forbid, then what he consumed on Shabbos was tevel. Okay? He made a non-specific designation. Exactly. Since he made a non-specific designation, if you don't carry it out at the end, the whole thing is nothing. So the kasha is, when a person says, Pruta Bakiz Hegdish, why are we saying that right away there's a Asham Talmud? And if he spends all of the prutas in the kiss, then according to everyone, even according to the Chachamim, right? He was moil. Why? He never specified which pruta. He never said which coin. He said a coin in this case is going to be hegdish. Why don't we say, in the opposite direction, but the same logic, that if at the end he never designates a specific pruta, which means he spends it all on himself, then his declaration retroactively is a non-declaration. Then the Bechlal should not be Me'ilah. That was the kasha of Reish Lakish, which was a great kasha. Now, on top of Daf Ayin, Rabbi Yoina answers, that's the way we're going to learn. Rabbi Yoina says there's a difference. The difference is, his words are, Toli Bahafrasha, that in our Mishnah, the person says, Masha Ani Osid Lahafrish. In other words, he said that since he says he will be doing it, if he doesn't do it, then nothing happened. In the negative, then it comes out the mafreya that he ate tevel. In the Mishnah Me'ilah, he never said that in the future I'm going to designate a pruta, or in the future I'm going to identify a pruta. He never said that. He said a pruta bakizeh. Now, he didn't specify which one, but he never made it dependent on a future action, which is why for sure one is hegdish. We just don't know which one. And therefore, if he spends all of them, yes, he was moil b'hegdish. That is the answer of Rabbi Yoina. What's very interesting is that normally when you have a kasha with teretz, we would never presume that Reish Lakish did not accept the answer. Our sugya today, that's the way the Yerushalmi learns, has an understanding in the Havamina that Reish Lakish, who didn't suggest that answer himself, does not agree with this answer. That Reish Lakish learns from our Mishnah, independent whether he said that which I will do in the future or not, that when a person makes a non-specific designation, these are the words, a non-specific designation, if at the end you don't specify, the whole thing is retroactively nullified. Taka, he has a kasha in the Mishnah Me'ilah, but so holds Reish Lakish in the Havamina. Based on that, that's where we're going to begin. The Gemara is going to bring a sugya in Me'ilah. You have every one of the Noise Kalim links it to another din in Me'ilah. We are going to follow the sugya the way the Gra learns it. We're going to learn the Gra on Ksav Yad Aleph in the bottom. He's going to link it to a sugya Me'ilah Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis, as we will explain. Dinim connected to Nisach Hamayim. if a person is going to be moil by nisu chamayim, if they were makadesh more than the 3 loig necessary, as we'll speak out. The way we will understand that sugya in Meila, it's going to come out that the Reish Lakish's premise is wrong, and the Gemara is going to conclude that after Reish Lakish heard the response from Rabbi Yoina, he agrees with Rabbi Yoina, which is normally the way it works. And therefore, there won't be a problem, not with the Mishnah in Meila Chaf Aleph, and not with another Mishnah in Meila and the Bavli Daf Yud Gimel, if it's connected to that sugya. Now, we're going to have a very interesting initial machlokes Amoraim regarding a case that we never learned about yet. And that is, what happens if on Erev Shabbos, a person identifies clearly what of the pile will be Trumas Umaisis. But he says that I only want for my identified Truma to be Chal, which means to take effect on Shabbos. He separates it now, or it doesn't have to, he identifies it now, but he makes a precondition out of Shabbos that which I am identifying now should only take effect on Shabbos. We learned the beginning of this Pedic that the Chachamim mitzad Makeh Patash Midrabanan don't allow us to be Mesak and Tevel on Shabbos. Here, the action, the identification is done on Erev Shabbos. But he makes a stipulation that he only wants it to be Chal on Shabbos. On Shabbos, he's not doing an act. But on Shabbos, the effect is going into effect on Shabbos. So we're going to have an initial machlokes Amoraim. Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Lazar will say it's okay. And initially, Rabbi Yossi Berabun will say it's prohibited. I want you to know that we're going to speak out a little bit, if we'll have time, that generally, setting a timer, let's say if your sprinklers are on a timer. So you did the action out of Shabbos, but it will only go into effect on Shabbos. That's something that's permitted. By Bishul, it's not. That's the big exception. And I'll speak more about it. That's really the topic. The Gemara is going to actually conclude that Rabbi Yossi Berabun retracted, and he will hold that it will be permitted. Okay. And that's going to be based on a Braisa, based on a Mishnah of Mesechtes Tful Yoim, and that's going to be a fascinating sugya. God willing, we will start today on Daf Ayin Amud Beis, the 5th Mishnah, Halacha Hey, in which the Mishnah gives 2 cases that will have to be clarified more, God willing, on Daf Ayin Aleph. The first case will be when a person has figs. Right, we already had this Reisha quoted in the beginning of the Pedic. It means I own figs in my home, but I'm on the Beis Medrash. I realize that if Shabbos, it's still Tevel. I want to be able to eat from it on Shabbos. I will physically not get there. So the Mishnah will give the first case where the person declares Shnei Te'enim Sha'ani Asid Lahafrish, etc. And in other words, he's making this pre-stipulation, this Tanai on Erev Shabbos. In the beginning of this Pedic, we learned that he can separate it on Shabbos. We're going to learn today and tomorrow that Nishta Zay Pashut, even though he makes a stipulation on Erev Shabbos, by Tevel Vadai, when may one taka separate it on Shabbos? Only if he needs the figs on Shabbos. So it's the Tzorech Shabbos. If he's not planning to eat of those figs on Shabbos, by Tevel Gamur, he can make that declaration. He can eat some of them, but he'll have to separate it after Shabbos, relying on Breira. By Demai, even if he doesn't plan to eat all of it on Shabbos, he will be allowed to do it because he made the pre-Shabbos stipulation. That will be the 2 cases in the Mishnah, one by Tevel and one by Demai, and there's a difference. By Demai, we're more lenient, and this will be clarified, God willing, already tomorrow on Daf Ayin Aleph. Okay, so Chevra Daf Ayin Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amud. Again, the Gemara is beginning based on the premise that Reish Lakish does not agree with Rabbi Yoina's differentiation that we have on top of the Amud, that it's totally Bahafrasha. In other words, we're coming with the premise based on the Kasha of Reish Lakish that if a person makes a non-specified designation, if at the end you never identify what it is, then l'mafreya tevel. Or even in the case of Hegdish, theoretically, and it's against the Mishnah, l'mafreya, it's not Hegdish. Based on that, the Gemara has a kasha. And it appears that there is a stira between what Reish Lakish himself said in another din in the Sechtas Me'ilah. Okay, what we learned yesterday was Me'ilah Daf Chaf Aleph in the Babli. What we're learning now is Me'ilah somewhere. It's amazing. If you can look inside, we're going to go with the Marafulda and not with the Rashirilio. The Rashirilio says it's referring to Me'ilah Daf Yud Ches. We're going to go with Me'ilah Daf Yud Gimel, and we're going to read the ground side after we read the Gemara. Says the Gemara. Chalfa da kasha. Chalfa shitasi the Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Come on, over there, Me'ilah. Let's go with Me'ilah Daf Yud Gimel. We have the following scenario. Now, what's the scenario over there? Let's read inside. Let's read inside the Gemara, guys. Before we read the Gemara, go all the goats. It's on the right column. It's around 5 lines from the top. It's more or less the middle of the right column. Mechalfa shitasi the Reish Lakish. Taman hu Amar. And he's quoting the words, what are we talking about? Perush. Tahainu, Gabi Niso Hamayim, Diktoni b'Mesechtas Me'ilah, Hamayim Shebakad, Ein Moyalin Bohem. Okay, so what are we saying? First of all, guys, on the 7 days of Sukkot, Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Yeah, I know that generally the Rambam says Halacha l'Moshe Sinai is defined, but there is no a source at all in the Torah. We know that there is Remes with Mayim, right? But whatever it is, we say Allah Moshe Sinai that on the holiday of Sukkot Simcha, aside of pouring wine, even according to the Rambam, on Sukkot the wine was poured on top of the Mizbeach. Aside of that, Nisucha Mayim. How much Mayim is poured? That's good to know. Just like the quantity of the wine is 3 loig, same the quantity of Mayim is 3 loig. By the way, if you remember that the holes in the bowls on top of the Mizbeach are of a different size because water flows quicker, wine flows a little bit slower if it's good, thick wine, and therefore the hole of the wine was a bit bigger, the hole of the water was a bit smaller. We wanted for the wine and the water to flow and conclude at the same time. 3 loik. Now, when they gathered the mayim right from the shiluach, it's not yet sanctified on the level that if someone uses it for their own benefit, they're chayav me'ilah. But like any other item, once it's placed in a clay shadis, that's the rule. Now it's imbued with inherent kedusha. And now if a person by accident uses it for themselves, and I want to make it clear by mind, if they have hana of the value of a pruta, they're chayav me'ilah. Side with the money penalty, side with hasham me'ilah. Now, what will happen? That's the case of the Mishnah, Daf Yud Gimel. What will happen if a person gathered from the Shiluach, let's just give an example, 6 loig of mayim, double the amount, and they put it in a klisharis that can hold 6 loig, but they only need 3. Now, if we were to say it's all sanctified, then there's nothing to talk about. The fact is, we don't say that. Only 3 loig is sanctified. And that's what Reish Lakish is addressing, what the Mishnah is addressing. In other words, how much of the water does one have to have hana from in order for them to be chayiv and me'ilah? It's based on the rule of the Mishnah that we don't say all of the mayim is neskadish. It's only the 3 loig. This is a great example. Which 3 loig? It's not specified. It's not specified.
It's specified because they're pleased, not coach.
No. If they put it in a clay shadis. But the klisharis is of 6 loig. But since we only need 3 loig, step number 1 is that's the Mishnah that only 3 loig of the 6 loig is sanctified, but it's not specified. Now let's go with the Havamina that Reish Lakish stands his ground that whenever you have a non-specified item, if you never end up specifying it, it's never holy to begin with. Gavaldik, Yakir wants to say something. The Mishnah, the Shlakish says, let's read inside the Gviragra. Nachamon. So let's go 3 lines from the bottom. Right, second to last line of the right column. Now, obviously, not if you drink up the whole thing, but if you only drink a little bit of water. Why? The Shema However, the Shlakish clarifies, we don't say you'll never be chayiv me'ilah. You're only not chayiv me'ilah if you had an ava pruta. Because I'm going to argue you drank by accident the pruta of the non-consecrated. But if you drank for sure into the three perus, the last line in the gra, the im shasa kol kach at sheyavei lechol gimel lugin pruta, you for sure are consuming in the gimel lugin. Then moyalim. Why? Because the amrinon shema oisan shloisha lugin shalakdish gamkin anekadei prut. Right on the top of the left column in the gra alma de sava she oisam hagimel lugin kadosh afsha hadayin lo hifrish. And hachamashma that the Reish Lakish holds that if a person consecrates something, in our case truma, but they don't specify it, if they never specify it, it never becomes holy. I'm reading in the Groloi Kaddish Klal, which is why Reish Lakish had the kasha. That why do we have in Me'ilah Chaf Aleph yesterday that when the person says Pruta ba kiz zeh hegdish, if they spend the whole kiss, bein la Rabbi Akiva, bein la Chachamim the hegdish, Reish Lakish asks why. If you never designated which Pruta, none of it should be hegdish. So how does he himself said? Now let's read it in the Gemara that even though the Mishnah says not all 6 are consecrated, but 3 are, but they're not specified. Reish Lakish says, I want you to know that we read the Gra. It's mashma to me that the Gra is saying that for you to be moyel, you have to drink 3 lug plus a prut of the other 3 lug. Some understand that what the Reish Lakish was saying is that you have to drink 2 prutas value, 2 prutas worth, because proportionally, in my example of 6, well, it's normally if you would only have 3, you drink up the amount of 1 pruta, you're moyel. Since you have 6, half is not. So you have to drink 2 prutas worth. That's the lefi cheshbon. Doesn't matter. This way or that way. One thing is clear. Reish Lakish wants to emphasize, don't misunderstand Me'ilah Yud Gimel Bavli, that you're never moyel. You're only not moyel in the beginning. At some point you will be moyel. Why? Reish Lakish should understand you should never be moyel. Because Hachin over here, but here he says, with this kasha, that even if you spend the whole kiss, you should never be moyel. All of this is based on the premise that Reish Lakish did not accept Rabbi Yoina's answer. Maybe because maybe we have to know when Rabbi Yoina lived. In other words, Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, we know they were brother-in-laws, right? They conversed with each other. There's some reason there's a Sahaba mina that he rejected it, but the Gemara says no. That min the itzarchat lei chazaru pashte. No. The itzarchat in the Yerushalmi means akasha. Something bothered. He needed something. Forget about the Mishnah that we learned today in Me'ilah Daf Yud Gimel. Reish Lakish had a problem. Me'ilah Chaf Aleph versus the Mai. And the only difference is that when you say Sha'ani Asid Lahafrij, since you linked it to what you will do, which is in our case in the Mai, and a Chanami, if you never do it, then Limafreya, nothing happened. Because you said something that I will do in the future. Masha Enkin, he accepted that answer. Masha Enkin, yesterday, Me'ilah Chaf Aleph, a guy says that Pruta Bakiza Hektish, not in the future. So then one of them is Hektish. If you spell all of them, if you spend all of them, according to everyone, Asham Me'ilos. Same thing will be in today's day, in Me'ilah Daf Yud Gimel. You're Magdish, all of the waters. You put it in a clay shadis. You're not in the future. The din is that since you added more than the 3, the added is not consecrated, but the 3 are consecrated. It cannot be undone. You don't need to specify which 3 it is. And Reish Lakish agrees, therefore, with the answer of Rabbi Yoin. Okay. Now, Atkan, the whole Pedek Shvi, the person makes a Erev Shabbos pre-designation, or he makes a designation without identifying what. And that's something that either you will be allowed to do on Shabbos, the identification, or perhaps only on Matzah Shabbos, but what you do on Matzah Shabbos is good retroactive, which will allow you to eat it on Shabbos, even pre-identification, the Chiddush, right, of Bereira. All of this is that when the person is making his Tanai, he's not identifying it on Erev Shabbos. He's making the Hafrasha on some level to be identified later. Now we're going mamish the opposite. Mamish the opposite. A person Erev Shabbos, for whatever reason, is identifying what is Truma. And for whatever reason, he's saying, and this, I'll give you a reason soon. We'll see a reason. This should be Chal on Shabbos. In other words, the question is, what exactly is prohibited? Is the Isur D'Rabbanan on the act of Hafrasha? Then you would be allowed to do it. Because the act of Hafrasha, which always remembers, you never have to do a physical Hafrasha. You have to just identify, right? Machshava, which means you verbalize and you say what it is, and that's it. So you did the act out of Shabbos. It's only taking effect on Shabbos. Who cares? But maybe the Isur, the Gezeda D'Rabbanan is even on the effect. Then it would be also. That's the topic over here. So Omar Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Los. Adam Oimed Me'erev Shabbos Oimed. He's the lenient one. At the end, Rabbi Yossi ben Abun will agree with him. But he begins by saying a person is allowed to stand on Erev Shabbos. Harei zu truma. Harei zu truma. When will it take effect? L'machar. However, what one may not do, everyone agrees with this, is that if nothing was done before Shabbos, garnish was done before Shabbos, and a person is standing on Shabbos and he's saying, Harei zu truma, to be effect tomorrow, all right? I'm not even talking about eating, guys. I'm not even talking about whether you're allowed to eat or not. He's making it clear that the Isur B'Drabanan is to do the act of Hafrosh, regardless when it will take effect. So even in a case, the second case of Rabbi Yitzchak, a person is doing the Hafrosha now, and he's saying, no, it's only going to be Chal tomorrow. You violated the Isur B'Drabanan because you did a Hafrosha on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. Even though you were not masakin it, doesn't matter. That's what the Chachamim says. Don't do the act. And therefore, lekula, if the act was done on Friday, even though you said it's only going to go into effect on Shabbos, Rabbi Yitzchak holds that it's mutter. The prohibition is the act, not the effect. Simple. However, Omar Rabbi Yossi ben Abun, he holds both are prohibited. Saya her, saya hin. He's not flipping it. Both the act and or the effect. Ein Adam oimed me'erev Shabbos v'oimed harei zu truma lo machar. Not allowed to do it. In other words, even the effect of making the produce rectified is not allowed to be done. Okay, very simple. I'm gonna link it back to halacha l'maaseh Shabbos. But look how the Gemara is going to have a kasha against Rabbi Yossi ben Abun's brilliant, and indeed it's going to be so strong that he's going to retract. He's going to be moida to Rabbi Yitzchak. Let me first share like this. That, when a person is tamei and they go to the mikvah, so if a person has a av hatuma on them and they go to the mikvah, right? This is linked already to the first mission of Masechta Brachas, even though for some dinim they are completely tahar. However, when it comes to truma, there is still enough of a vestige, of a remnant, shirayim of truma on the person, that they have to wait until Tzei Sakri Chavim. Head of Shemesh means Tzei Sakri Chavim until Laila, Vadai, and then that Tuma completely is removed from the person, even though they didn't do anything, but they did by going to the mikveh during the day, and then they will not be Matama Truma or Truma Sumaisim. I want to make it clear, Chavra, that a Tful Yoim is not enough Tamei to make my sedition. Tamei, this is important. Like people says, who cares about my sedition? Because don't forget that in my sedition, you will then separate Trumas Meiser. But if you didn't yet separate the Trumas Meiser from the my sedition, even though it's Tevel and there will be Truma removed from it, if you didn't do that yet, if a Tful Yom touches my sedition, there is no problem. Zichir, there's not a problem for a Tful Yom to touch Chulin, but that's not the topic. The topic that we're going to quote, the Mishnah in Tful Yom, will be about a person who has a keli that's tamei, who took it to the mikvah. The keli is tamei on the level of a tful yom. The person put in this keli my sedishim. The person is a kohen. He wants to separate before Shabbos from the ma'asedishin, trumas ma'ased, for him to be allowed to eat the ma'asedishin that belongs to him, the trumas ma'ased that belongs to him. But there's a problem. The problem is that only at night will the keli lose its status of tful yom and not be metame the trumas ma'aser. So this is mamash our case. So here will be a scenario where a person wants to make the designation, the separation, the identification Erev Shabbos, but he only wants it to go into effect when it's night. Mamish. Okay, says the Mishnah. Masnisa, pliga al Rabbi Yosef Rabun. And in the Bible, it's always the opposite. That Rabbi Yosef Rabun can argue with the Mishnah, but the way they word it is, the Mishnah argues with you. And therefore you're refuted. Checkmate. Says in the Mishnah, this Tvul Yoim Perek Daled, Mishnah Daled, login. Login is just an example. It's a keli, right? It's a pitcher, which it has the status of a Tvul Yoim. Umilo menachavius meiser tevel. Guys, meiser tevel means meiser rishoin. That's not yet rectified because you did not yet separate Trumas meiser. Meiser rishon does not acquire Tuma from a keli that's on the level of Tvul Yoim at all, but you still can eat it. Oh, and like look inside the top Marav folder, right? Masnisim pliga Rabbi Yitzchak ben Rav Lozer. Look at the different girsa. Hachi Garcina. Okay, we're obviously learning that the Gemara's kasha is on Rabbi Yossi, but let's read at least the case from the Marav folder. Login kamay kadem shalates shenitmu and the nitmu by yoim v'dayin lo'head of shim shanat shetechsha. And since the rule is with full yoim poisalas hatruma, and Vahu, the owner is a kohen because he wants to eat the trumas meiser. Vahu milo oisin login menachavies sheyesh sham tevel meiser rishoin. Gavaldik, back inside the Gemara, which is quoting a Mishnah, Im Omar Harezu Trumas Meiser Lechem. So if the guy says, okay, it's going to become Trumas Meiser, maybe he wants everything in the picture to be Trumas Meiser for another Meiser. It doesn't matter. He's declaring that which will become Trumas Meiser will only become Trumas Meiser after it gets dark. That's good. Harezu Trumas Meiser. Meaning, not only is a person allowed to make an act now and to have it go into effect later, but Hitaka prevented the food from becoming tummy, which is great. Now, let's go to another din in Hilchos Shabbos. Again, why would a person do it like you're going to do it? Because you can do it. I mean, you're doing it because you can't tithe on Shabbos. But that's the solution. Now let's learn about Hilchos Erev Tchumen. For Erev Tchumen, a person has to place Mazain l'shtei Seudos, and a kohen is allowed to place Truma. But if a person placed food that halachically may not be eaten, it will not be valid as a Erev. So what's going to happen if this chacham, if this kohen is taking this pitcher and he wants to use it as an Erev? So the din of Eruv is that the Eruv has to go into effect Bein Hashmashos. The Tuma that goes away is only after Bein Hashmashos. So therefore, this you can't dance in all the weddings. Atkan. That im Omar Hareze Eruv, then Lo Yomar Klum. Lo Yomar Klum means your Eruv is not effective. Again, the designation is going to work. In other words, it's going to go into effect at night, and therefore, after it's dark, what you have in this barrel is not meiser rishon that's tevel. No, you have a trumas meiser, and the trumas meiser is not tomei. But to use it as an eruv, you cannot do it. So clearly, we see over here. You know what? The Marafulda has a whole different limit. Let's go to the Pnei Moshe. Pnei Moshe is learning that this is a kasha. It's easy to chap the Pnei Moshe on Rabbi Yossi in mamash middle of the Amid. Im amrei erev lo yom klum the beinen suuda haruim bo yoim the leke sharei ene roya afilu l'koin ad achad erev shemesh. So what's the bottom line? In fact, the Gemara Shema Inan Miyas, we see bottom line the yochol lahasnis me erev Shabbos shaloi tei truma ad hashabbos. Clearly, the kasha Rabbi Yossi berabun. So initially, the Gemara attempted to say pasala lisha avar. Look inside the Pnei Moshe Pasal the Hasam b'di'evid might. And im Amar Areza Trumas Ma'aser Mishetechshach. Then b'di'evid it's okay. Let me add something, Simcha. What happens if a person separates Trumas Ma'aser Stam Grub on Shabbos? no pre-tanoim. The guy violated this or the rabbanon. It's effective. We don't say, as you can say by some people say by certain dinah d'oraisa, that anything that Hashem says not to do, if you did it, loy mahani, even there, by yaroyos, we don't.
Rabbi Akiva, right?
Huh?
Rabbi Akiva.
By Rabbi Akiva, for example, yeah. But I'm saying by the rabbanon we don't say that. Very good. So it's only b'diavad. The Gemara says no, it's not true, because there are words in the Braisa that explicitly verbalize this Mishnah in a lechatchila dikoloshin, because v'ha'atani rabchia, not im amar. Im amar, taka, you can say im amar means you taka shouldn't have done it, but if you did it, no, it's the same. The Braisa of Rabchia is quoting the same Mishnah that we just had over here in Tful Yoim, but it writes the words not im amar but oimer. So since the Braisa that Rabchia taught, this part of Torah Shebal Peh, the lashon oimer islach meimar l'sha'abar. Oimer means you can say it, and indeed, same thing about a good for Chazar Bay. It's amazing that both things we learned today, how Rish Lakish was Chazar, how Rabbi Yossi Barabun Barab Chazar, and just to mention the bottom line, to my knowledge, at least vaguely what I'm saying is correct, and I'm sure there are many exceptions. That by Hilchas Bishul, that's our approach of Rabbi Yossi, only by Hilchas Bishul. Right, that we don't put on, we don't do an action before Shabbos for the action to go into effect on Shabbos. I'm not talking about shehiyah. I'm talking about plugging in a hot water or something and putting it on a timer. That would be the best example for me. Once you did your action out of Shabbos, it's going to be chal on Shabbos. By bishul, it's asur. By everything else, it's mutter. To my knowledge, people are thinking, but I think that's mamish. That's what this topic is. It's great.
I don't know what when we learned it in Smichas Chaver, they didn't specify that it had to do with bishul, but in general, Moshe Feinstein is against using timers, bichlal, except for lights. But it's become the people use it for like air conditioning and like that.
For air conditioning, then people use it for.
But the thing you're talking about is like brewing a coffee on Shabbos.
Correct.
And I don't think it was because specifically bishul, but there was all these other things that maybe you're going to push a button, or maybe there's no blech, and and then it reduces the according to Reb Moshe, the whole thing with timers. So you combine it all, everybody says no good. But I don't remember that it's specifically bishul over anything else. Anyway. If
we're going by memory, so I remember from Rabbi Reichik that from 1982. I mean, I'm going back a couple of years. That the bishul is special. Okay, anyways, weiter. So now, guys, this is the final Mishnah in this Perek that's speaking about this topic. There are two cases in this Mishnah. The difference between them is Tevel and Demai. The Mishnah does not clarify b'diyuk the difference other than a word, and that will have to leave for the subsequent Gemara to further clarify the dinim in the Mishnah. The first case in the Mishnah we quoted in the first daf of this Perek. That the case is Tevel. He owns it. That was very important. Remember, by Demai, the whole pre-Tanai can be done even though you don't own it, right? I'm going to be hosted by you. By that's what Rabbi Yechanan began the whole thing with in this Perek. But here you have it. It's in your house. So what's the problem? The problem is that Behuva Beis HaMedrash, Oy Basada, and you know that you will not have enough time to go home Erev Shabbos to do what you should normally do, which is to make sure that you can have Oynik Shabbos and by tithing it. So since you can't be there physically, Oymer, you say the following: Shnei te'enim sha'ani osid lahafresh. You see the words osid, but you know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say the word machar. And we'll see that in a moment to contrast case 1 to case 2. You say sha'ani osid lahafresh, areim truma. And Vasora Meiser, we already said it's not 10, it's really 9.8. And really, you're not allowed to be Ma'aser Umadois. So that's the way the Rebbe in the Mishnah rounds up in Boloshana HaMishnah. And Vitisha, which is really 8.8, is Meiser Sheni. Now, when do you do the separation? I just want to make it clear. We'll leave this for the Gemara. When we began the Masechta, when we began the Perek, it sounded like Yamachol, we do it on Shabbos. And we'll see. If I need to eat all the figs on Shabbos, you can do it on Shabbos. I'm just giving you a heads up. But if I don't need to eat all the figs on Shabbos, then based on our Mishnayisim that follow Shitas Rabbi Meir, that even by Dinei Doiraisa, this is a Din Doiraisa, this is not the Mai, right? you're going to rely on Breira. It's only us and Midrabanan to tithe it, but you have to tithe it Midoraisa. Then Taka, you'll do it not Lamachar. Friday, when you're standing Friday, you say tomorrow is Shabbos. It's not tomorrow, it's 2 days. What's a Shabbos? And it's okay. Like we already had this in the previous Mishnayos, and that you do it Matzah Shabbos and Breira. But that's why Rabbi didn't write the word Machar, because you can't always do it on Shabbos. In contrast, Hayudamai, same case. In our case, it's not you're going to be invited, but you're going, it's your own, but you're not going to make it home on time to separate the Demai separations. So, Omer, you say, now here again, another detail, you don't have to speak about Truma Gedoyla. Masha'ani asid lahafrish lemachar, clearly, because by Demai, even if you don't plan to eat it, you can do this. Certainly, you don't have to eat all of it. Maybe you don't have to eat any of it. We'll see more. But you can do it tomorrow on Shabbos. So, what I'm you always begin by picking up the Trumas Meiser, even though you can't begin with Trumas Meiser, but you begin with Trumas Meiser, Areu Meiser, which is Trumas Meiser. But have 1 second. Meiser means Meiserishan. It's what will become Trumas Meiser. This now is first Meiserishan, but this is not enough. Ushar Meiser Samachloi, 9 times this amount. And then you say that which I picked up and I began as Meiserishan designation, Zesho, Sisi Meiser, already also Trumas Meiser Olav. And then you have to address the Meiser Sheni. And ideally, you have to be Koveya Makoim, which is what you're doing. Or Meiser Sheni, but Svainoi, or Bidroimoi, and then it will become a Cholalamois. So these are the 2 dinim, Sai by Tevel, Sai by Demai. Now, before the Gemara goes into the difference, the Lamachar versus the non-Lamachar, and more, before that, we're going to have a kitzit of a kitzit. The Gemara asks, "My kedoin." So says the Marafulda that what the Gemara is really doing. If you want to go to Daf Samach Vav Amud Beis, when we learned the second Mishnah in the Spedic regarding liquid, right? And the Gemara wanted to understand. Hold on, the stira by the liquid was that if it goes into effect only after you drink the cup, then before you drink the cup, you're drinking damai or tevet. If it goes into effect before, then there's a mixture. So that's really what the Gemara means to ask over here. It's just relying on, it was like 3 more words we had over there in Daf Samach Vav Amud Beis, that you have a mixture. That's the kash. Well, what is it going into effect? If it's going to effect right now, and you're only going to be doing it lamachar, so it's mixed. So the answer is that you're making 2 statements, and the 2 statements is mikvar means now, but lichash afrishenu only when I'll separate it. And that's the whole chiddush of the whole series of these mishnayos, in that now meaning that it's non-specified designation. It's not specified. Is enough that whatever will eventually not be it is already considered chulin and not a mixture. But why isn't it a mixture? Because only when you identify it will it be identified. But 1 second, if you didn't identify it, you're having to no. Because since when you will identify it, it's going to go back retroactive. And you're making the statement mikvar immediately when I'll do it.
Is there not an issue that he doesn't end up separating it?
And yes, there's the issue that if you won't separate it, that's not going to be good. And a chanami. So just for the record, the Gemara already said that where does Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon argue with our Mishnah, which is Rabbi Meir, when you have a large amount of wine? But by the cup, the Gemara already said you're drinking it right away. There's lesser of a worry. Another thing that our Mishnah, speaking about te'enim, is wine, liquids, if the wineskin, what's a lashonu? If the noid cracks, you're done. If what's going to be by the te'enim? So the bag cracks. I'm saying it's a sal. I know that it can get disgusting. It's not so simple, but there's something that's not shchiach is much less shchiach that it's mamish going to get ruined, and we are relying on it, and that's why it works. You get the best of both worlds, and again, you're doing it l'macher on Shabbos, and we'll stop over here. Wow, a few minutes early to make up for yesterday and to be continued. Great.